Hey everyone, it's Miss Queen Crypto, and I am back again for another installment of Friday Block Talk here on the Embily channel. Now, this week, for me at least, is finals week. So if you didn't know, I'm currently a student in college. I'm studying biomedical engineering, and so my finals week is not going to be such a nice and easy breezy time. So I'm sorry if today's video isn't the most fun and energetic and well thought out, well researched video, but I wanted to do something today where it's more of like a video entry on a diary, kind of a continuous train of thought, and just go through some of my thoughts and why I personally have gotten so into Bitcoin and why I enjoy it and like researching it as much as I do now. And for me personally, a lot of it has to do with time preference. Now, time preference is something that I had never associated that term before with this concept until I read the Bitcoin Standard, but it kind of put a lot of things into perspective for me, which was really, really cool. And so I read that book a little over a year ago now for the first time, and that's one of those things that has just continued to stay with me, and it's something that I now think about and relate to my life in more ways than just with Bitcoin. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Let's get into it. So if you've never heard that term before, time preference, it basically is the idea that you can either choose to prioritize your satisfaction in the moment and now or in the short term, or you can choose to prioritize your future self's satisfaction or enjoyment in the long term. And so you can either have a low time preference or a high time preference. A high time preference is something like a dog when they see a treat, or like a kid when offered candy. And so you are prioritizing your own enjoyment in this moment, and you're not really thinking about the future, and you're not thinking about how it necessarily will affect the future. Or if you are, you don't really care. And then having a low time preference has to do with maybe not doing what you want to do right now. You're doing something, but you're paving the way for the future. You're setting yourself up for a better future in hopes that the satisfaction you will feel at the end of the road is going to be worth it. And so if you do read the Bitcoin Standard, he has a whole chapter on this, and he talks about, it's like a variant of the anecdote, if you teach a man to fish, he'll eat for a life, but if you only give a man a fish, he'll eat for the day, kind of thing. And it's a really good anecdote, and time preference is probably one of the things in this book that has followed me the most throughout my own life. It's something that I think about when it comes to studying, for example, which is something that I have thought about a lot this week. But basically when I'm sitting here alone in my room and I really don't want to do another practice exam for Orgo, and I'm like, oh, I really wish I could just call my friends and go hang out with them. I'm sure they're doing something super fun. I think to myself about, okay, but if I were to do that right now, sure, I would have a better night tonight, but I would not be prepared for my exam. And if I'm not prepared for my exam, I'm probably not going to get the grade that I want on that exam, and probably not going to get the grade that I want in the class. And honestly, the dissatisfaction that I would feel from bombing that last exam and getting a bad grade in the class is not worth the satisfaction of hanging out with my friends for an extra night, at least during finals week. Obviously, you have to find a balance with these things. There's no way that you can just continuously put off your own satisfaction in hopes that one day you'll change that thought pattern, because if the only thing you're ever doing is prioritizing the future is never going to come. There will always be a future. So that's a conversation for another day. But when we're talking about this kind of short term as in couple of days for me or for studying, but this also relates to Bitcoin, because Bitcoin as a deflationary asset, your money will hold more value. Your Bitcoin will hold more value in the future than it does now. And so we see that really clearly. If the first ever time that Bitcoin was used for a transaction, the pizza, 100,000 Bitcoin for a pizza, that was a short-term decision. And obviously I know that that's not the best example of this, but holding on to that nowadays, very different story. So having a shorter, smaller time preference would have been beneficial in that case. But this brings me back to a class that I took last semester. It was the first humanities class that I've taken here, and it was probably 1 out of 3 that I'll take in my college experience. I'm not a humanities girly. I'm not a big philosophy girly, but I do think that it's really cool, and I enjoyed the class. The class that I took was called The Idea of Happiness. And so, again, philosophy is not my strong suit, but I thought that that would be a really interesting class. And so the whole premise was to hopefully define what happiness is and how to achieve it, which, spoiler alert, if you want to take the class, we didn't figure anything out. We did not come to a solution, which I guess you could have guessed, but there is no key to happiness. Crazy, there's no one shot. But the first thing that we learned about was a moral philosophy kind of like called hedonism, which I'm sure you've heard about. It's actually one of my favorite insults to call someone a hedonist, because I think that it's just a lot funnier than calling someone a savage, but I think there's similar strains. Anyways, my professor, he gave us a thought experiment, and he told the class, he said, you are given a choice. As you stand right now, you have the choice, and you could be transformed into a clam. Now hear me out. You could be transformed into a clam. You can't move, you have no responsibilities, there's nothing you can do, nothing you will do. However, you are in a permanent state of ecstasy. Like every moment, all the best feeling in the world is resonating throughout your core. That's the only thing you're experiencing at any given moment, just that pure euphoria. If you were given that decision and you could live like that clam for the rest of your life, would you take the offer? Now, everyone in the class was like, no, absolutely not. I would not change that. And it's a very interesting point to counter the whole hedonist argument, which is saying like, oh, well, happiness is only derived from pleasurable experiences. So if you chase pleasurable experiences, in the end, you will be happy. But would you be happy as the ecstasy clam? And the fact that no one in my class would have taken the offer was very indicative that this is probably not the best definition we have of what happiness is. And so then we jumped into another type of thought experiment, which was called the experience machine. And I believe the philosopher that proposed its name was Novak, but this was well over a year ago, so don't quote me on that. But the premise behind the experience machine was that you basically just get hooked up to this machine, and there's like wires everywhere, but once you're in the machine, you are able to go through and run a simulation on anything you wanted. Like, you could run a simulation on anything you can imagine, and when you're in the simulation, you don't know that you're in a simulation. So everything you're experiencing feels as if you are really living it, and all of the past events that must have happened in order to lead up to it all feel real. They're all in your memory. It's something that you have lived when you're in the simulation. And so if you were supposedly, like, say climbing Mount Everest was one of your goals in life, like you thought that would be like hitting the top peak, that would be your peak. Like that's what you've lived for your entire life. If you were doing the experience machine, when you get hooked up and they press the button and you get sent into the machine, the only moment that you really experience is that final step that you would take to be on top. You would not live through the months of prep, the years of prep maybe, climbing mountains to like accommodate and like get yourself used to that type of altitude and all the pain and sickness and the effort that it took and all the training. You wouldn't have had to deal with any of that. You wouldn't have had to actually live through any of that, but you would still get the same fulfillment as you would if you had. And you're only living the best moment. Or like the same thing as like crossing a marathon or getting a PhD and walking across stage. And so it was the same type of question. If you were given the option, would you choose to live your life out in the experience machine, just jumping from one thing to another? And almost everyone in my class said no. I was actually the one dissent, but not because I wanted to be in the experience machine, but I just didn't believe them. I figured that they just couldn't actually understand what the premise of the machine was, because they were all like, no, I wouldn't be fulfilled by it. There would be no fulfillment in my life. But you don't know the difference when you're in there. So that's more of a logistical thing on my point. I was being contrarian. It's okay. It happens. But it gave me the whole time preference argument in like the back of my head. It was, well, without like the suffering and the stress and the pain that you have to work towards to get to that moment, it's not worth as much. Like you don't experience the moment in the same way as you would have without all of that painful buildup. Even though, yeah, hedonist argument, that should lower your overall happiness because it's something that isn't good, but it actually makes it better, because like having a low right here and then going up, that difference is still higher than just that, if that makes sense. But anyways, back on the time preference thing, it made me really think about like spending habits and everything. Like, oh, do I really need this coffee today, or can I save that and invest that, and then maybe 5 years from now it'll be worth a whole lot more, and the satisfaction that I can derive from spending that on something that is like a bigger deal, or spending it on someone that I love for like a big gift, like for my mom, I think that's worth more than like my immediate satisfaction of getting a coffee. And so hopefully these kind of like anecdotes and stories have been interesting to listen to. I know it's not the most crypto-centric kind of video, but I was in a little talkative mood, didn't really want to do a whole ton of research for today, especially with like all the stress going on in my life currently, and just talk about something that interests me. But if you want more of these like free form kind of videos, let me know. I'm more than happy to do it. If you want me to do another video on time preference, but more in the Bitcoin sense versus like me talking about time preference in my own life, I'm also more than happy to do that. This concept is something that I really like, and I think that the applications of the concept in various spheres is really cool to learn about. But that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like it and follow the Embily channel. And if you want to see more from me, follow me on Twitter at Miss Queen Crypto. I pinky promise I will be more active after finals. This, like all of them, has been a rough semester. But have a great week. I'll see you guys next time. Bye!